The business cycle or economic cycle is the downward and upward movement of gross domestic product around its long-term growth trend. These fluctuations typically involve shifts over time between periods of relatively rapid economic growth and periods of relative stagnation or decline. Used in the indefinite sense, a business cycle is a period of time containing a single boom and contraction in sequence. Business cycles are usually measured by considering the growth rate of real gross domestic product. Despite being termed cycles, these fluctuations in economic activity can prove unpredictable. A boom and bust cycle is one in which the expansions are rapid and the contractions are steep and severe. History theory. The first systematic exposition of periodic economic crises, in opposition to the existing theory of economic equilibrium, was the 1819 Nouveau Principes d'économie politique by Jean-Charles Léonard de Sismondi. Prior to that point, classical economics had either denied the existence of business cycles, blamed them on external factors, notably war, or only studied the long term. Sismondi found vindication in the Panic of 1825, which was the first unarguably international economic crisis, occurring in peacetime. Sismondi and his contemporary Robert Owen, who expressed similar but less systematic thoughts in 1817, report to the Committee of the Association for the Relief of the Manufacturing Poor. Both identified the cause of economic cycles as overproduction and underconsumption, caused in particular by wealth inequality. They advocated government intervention and socialism, respectively, as the solution. This work did not generate interest among classical economists, though underconsumption theory developed as a heterodox branch in economics until being systematized in Keynesian economics in the 1930s. Sismondi's theory of periodic crises was developed into a theory of alternating cycles by Charles Dunoyer, and similar theories, showing signs of influence by Sismondi, were developed by Johann Karl Rodbertus. Periodic crises in capitalism formed the basis of the theory of Karl Marx, who further claimed that these crises were increasing in severity and, on the basis of which, he predicted a communist revolution. He devoted hundreds of pages of Das Kapital to crises in progress and poverty. Henry George focused on land's role in crises, particularly land speculation, and proposed a single tax on land as a solution. Classification by periods. In 1860, French economist Clement Juglar first identified economic cycles 7 to 11 years long, although he cautiously did not claim any rigid regularity. Later, economist Joseph Schumpeter argued that a Juglar cycle has 4 stages: expansion, crisis, recession, recovery. Schumpeter's Juglar model associates recovery and prosperity with increases in productivity, consumer confidence, aggregate demand, and prices. In the mid-20th century, Schumpeter and others proposed a typology of business cycles according to their periodicity, so that a number of particular cycles were named after their discoverers or proposers. The kitchen inventory cycle of 3 to 5 years. The Juglar fixed investment cycle of 7 to 11 years. The Kuznets infrastructural investment cycle of 15 to 25 years. The Kondratiev wave or long technological cycle of 45 to 60 years. Interest in the different typologies of cycles has waned since the development of modern macroeconomics, which gives little support to the idea of regular periodic cycles. Occurrence. There were great increases in productivity, industrial production and real per capita product throughout period from 1870 to 1890 that included the Long Depression and 2 other recessions. There were also significant increases in productivity in the years leading up to the Great Depression. Both the Long and Great Depressions were characterized by overcapacity and market saturation. Over the period since the Industrial Revolution, technological progress has had a much larger effect on the economy than any fluctuations in credit or debt. the primary exception being the Great Depression, which caused a multi-year steep economic decline. The effect of technological progress can be seen by the purchasing power of an average hour's work, which has grown from $3 in 1900 to $22 in 1990, measured in 2010 dollars. There were similar increases in real wages during the 19th century. C. Productivity improving technologies. A table of innovations and long cycles can be seen at Kondratiov wave #. Modern modifications of Kondratiov theory. There were frequent crises in Europe and America in the 19th and first half of the 20th century, specifically the period 1815 to 1939. This period started from the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, which was immediately followed by the post-Napoleonic Depression in the United Kingdom, and culminated in the Great Depression of 1929–39, which led into World War II. See Financial Crisis. 19th century for listing and details. The first of these crises not associated with a war was the Panic of 1825. Business cycles in OECD countries after World War II were generally more restrained than the earlier business cycles. This was particularly true during the golden age of capitalism, and the period 1945 to 2008 did not experience a global downturn until the late 2000s recession. Economic stabilization policy using fiscal policy and monetary policy appeared to have dampened the worst excesses of business cycles, and automatic stabilization due to the aspects of the government's budget also helped mitigate the cycle even without conscious action by policymakers. In this period, the economic cycle, at least the problem of depressions, was twice declared dead. The first declaration was in the late 1960s, when the Phillips curve was seen as being able to steer the economy. However, this was followed by stagflation in the 1970s, which discredited the theory. The second declaration was in the early 2000s, following the stability and growth in the 1980s and 1990s in what came to be known as the Great Moderation. Notably, in 2003, Robert Lucas, in his presidential address to the American Economic Association, declared that the central problem of depression prevention has been solved, for all practical purposes. Unfortunately, this was followed by the 2008 to 2012 global recession. Various regions have experienced prolonged depressions, most dramatically the economic crisis in former Eastern Bloc countries following the end of the Soviet Union in 1991. For several of these countries, the period 1989 to 2010 has been an ongoing depression, with real incomes still lower than in 1989. This has been attributed not to a cyclical pattern, but to a mismanaged transition from command economies to market economies. Identifying. In 1946, economists Arthur F. Burns and Wesley C. Mitchell provided the now standard definition of business cycles in their book Measuring Business Cycles. Business cycles are a type of fluctuation found in the aggregate economic activity of nations that organize their work mainly in business enterprises. A cycle consists of expansions occurring at about the same time in many economic activities, followed by similarly general recessions, contractions, and revivals which merge into the expansion phase of the next cycle. In duration, business cycles vary from more than 1 year to 10 or 12 years. They are not divisible into shorter cycles of similar characteristics with amplitudes approximating their own. According to A. F. Burns, business cycles are not merely fluctuations in aggregate economic activity. The critical feature that distinguishes them from the commercial convulsions of earlier centuries or from the seasonal and other short-term variations of our own age is that the fluctuations are widely diffused over the economy, its industry, its commercial dealings, and its tangles of finance. The economy of the Western world is a system of closely interrelated parts. He who would understand business cycles must master the workings of an economic system organized largely in a network of free enterprises searching for profit. The problem of how business cycles come about is therefore inseparable from the problem of how a capitalist economy functions. In the United States, it is generally accepted that the National Bureau of Economic Research is the final arbiter of the dates of the peaks and troughs of the business cycle. An expansion is the period from a trough to a peak, and a recession is the period from a peak to a trough. The NBER identifies a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months. Normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production. Upper turning points of business cycle. Commodity prices and freight rates. There is often a close timing relationship between the upper turning points of the business cycle, commodity prices and freight rates, which is shown to be particularly tight in the grand peak years of 1873, 1889, 1900 and 1912. Spectral analysis of business cycles. Recent research employing spectral analysis has confirmed the presence of Kondratiov waves in the world GDP dynamics at an acceptable level of statistical significance. Korotayev and Sorel also detected shorter business cycles, dating the Kuznets to about 17 years and calling it the third subharmonic of the Kondratiov, meaning that there are 3 Kuznets cycles per Kondratiov, cycles or fluctuations. In recent years, economic theory has moved towards the study of economic fluctuation rather than a business cycle, though some economists use the phrase business cycle as a convenient shorthand. For Milton Friedman, calling the business cycle a cycle is a misnomer, because of its non-cyclical nature. Friedman believed that for the most part, excluding very large supply shocks, business declines are more of a monetary phenomenon.